The brand new Hello Neighbor game is not good. So if you weren't aware, the other day a brand new Hello Neighbor game had officially came out, which wouldn't normally be a huge deal, but this wasn't any normal Hello Neighbor game. This one is actually supposed to be the long-awaited sequel to the original title called Hello Neighbor 2 respectively. The game was released under early access and is currently classified as a beta release. For the sake of giving this game a fair chance, I'm going to entirely disregard the alphas and prototypes leading up to this game, just because all those were pretty buggy and were way different than this new version. In Hello Neighbor 2, the premise is incredibly similar to the first game, where we have to infiltrate the neighbor's home, more specifically this time the attic, to try and find out the secrets behind it. What makes this game way more interesting though is instead of there being 3 separate acts to the game, there are instead 3 separate houses that hold the keys, or should I say animal heads, to the puzzle that all need to be separately infiltrated to eventually solve the main puzzle inside of the neighbor's own mega home. The player who we play as, named Quentin, investigates these homes, solving their mini puzzles that include starting a fire in a bakery, changing music to make the owner fall asleep, and tricking another into crafting you a fish head for whatever reason. Anyway, after you collect the 3 animal heads scattered around the map, you can then bring them into the neighbor's new house, where you can unlock a hook that can be used to pull down the attic staircase. And upon entering this room, you are greeted by what looks like a child behind a curtain, but the game ends when we freeze in a cutscene and are attacked from presumably a new character named the Guest, who throughout the game had mysteriously lurked around us and then finally attacked us here in the end. So that's the concept that's being done here, which initially seems to be solid if it's done correctly, because it definitely is different from the original Hello Neighbor while still being in touch with itself. But where it goes wrong is when it comes to actually trying to complete this concept successfully. To describe this game's execution in one sentence, you could do all the steps that I just mentioned to complete the puzzle, or you could actually just break a window on top of the roof and end the game in the first 60 seconds. Okay, so in terms of pros, there are still quite a few despite me not liking this game. I've already told you guys that one of the good things about this game is the concept. We've spent the past 5 years running through the neighbor's home trying to discover his secrets, so this time we still will have to focus on the neighbor, but at the same time we'll have to go around to other people's buildings to complete smaller puzzles leading to the end of the game. Which, speaking of the neighbor's home, aesthetically it's an amazing aspect of the game. There seems to be specific music depending on where the player is, and when you go towards the neighbor's home specifically, things feel very eerie. It makes you feel creeped out, and it's a constant reminder both visually and auditorially that this is going to be the big scary house you have to go into if you want to discover what's in the attic. While walking through the house, the ambience is incredibly suspenseful, especially since every once in a while you can actually hear what sounds like children, more specifically ones that are in the need of help. It's both motivating and horrifying at the same time. While on this topic, I may as well say that this game's atmosphere overall is a great plus. No matter which home you enter, it feels immersive, and it allows you to focus on each task individually, which is super important in an open world environment, where it can get easy to get lost and feel like you're just in a big mess. The game's visuals are also very well themed in my opinion, as every single house's theming makes it feel like you're in an entirely separate part of the game. In terms of difficulty, I'm a little bit split on this issue, because on one hand, I personally thought the game actually did pretty well at being somewhat hard yet also rewarding, but at the same time, for me personally, I had watched people play the game before trying it myself, so out of the gate I had a better idea on what to do than the average blind player, and it may not be easy to recognize where to go because this is a pretty large map, but I do think this game does pretty well, at least in terms of replayability, because unless you know the plentiful exploits to this game to make it stupid easy, which I'll talk about more in a second, the game, no matter how many times I've tried it, still is pretty difficult to play through even when knowing all the puzzles. So I mentioned a lot of pretty good things about this game, but after the music and concept is discussed, that's where the positives begin to run thin. The first thing I started to notice with this game is the AI, simply put, just is not good. When this game first started to be rolled out with trailers and such, one of the first things that we were told was going to be a major improvement was the AI. We were given a bunch of cool things that were supposed to prove how much smarter it was. But the problem is that a lot of the time the AI just had no clue what to do. To try and make this game more of a sneak survival game instead of just a game about running from the neighbor, the devs had improved the AI of the game to sometimes stop and try to cut the player off in his tracks. This mechanic does work every once in a while from what I've noticed, but the problem is that for the 10% of the time it does work, 90% of the time the AI just has no clue what to do and they just freeze. All this does is make them slower and even more useless, so the AI is really no longer a threat. Like, at least in the older Hello Neighbor game, the character would chase you even if it was sort of dumb with how they did it, but in this game the neighbor along with all the other AIs, just have no clue what's going on at all. This issue alone makes the game just broken and single-handedly outweighs any of the positives I just mentioned, because none of that matters if you can't actually play the game correctly, which in this case couldn't be more true. The biggest issue that I noticed by far that makes this game literally unplayable is the bugs and overall polishing. There's so many issues with this game in terms of animation and everything being super poorly done, but despite my confidence that none of these smaller things will improve, it is still just in beta, so I can give them the benefit of the doubt. But the issue is that there's so many bigger bugs that make this game entirely broken. For example, there's this 20-second speedrun I've been seeing, and the strat involves a method that allows you to simply clip through the walls. And as mentioned, you could just at any time break the window of the neighbor's home and skip the entire game without even knowing any speedrun skills or anything. I won't beat a dead horse with always complaining about the tons of bugs, because if you've seen any of my other previous Hello Neighbor videos, I talk about them way too much. But simply put, if you play this game, you will experience some crazy bugs, most of which are AI related, along with, like I just said, everything being super janky throughout the experience. So basically, if you've played the original Hello Neighbor or any of the other games, the bugs are still there. Another big issue I could say is just as bad as that I need to talk about is the price of this freaking game. What the hell? This game costs $60. That is absolutely crazy, and you're never going to convince me that this game is worth $60. No way. I'm sure you guys are already rushing to the comments to tell me that it's actually only a $40 game, and plus this is only early access for the full game coming out later. But first off, the game is $60 if you want to buy the full thing. Something I hate about some games, this one included, is that they gatekeep content and then say that you only have to pay $40, which is too expensive anyway, but to get the entire intended experience, you have to pay more, which is so dumb. And in regards to this still being in early access, the devs have given me no reason to believe that this will be any better in the end. Hello Neighbor Original started and ended unfinished, and every single game they've released since has been that exact same way. So I'm not falling for it anymore, TinyBuild. I'm not convinced this game would be worth $20 when it's finished, let alone $60. The only reason I bought this game is to just make this exact video, and otherwise I would not have gotten it after seeing what it looks like. Hello Neighbor has had such a bad track record with games, and this was supposed to be their time to prove that this was better than all their other games, and that they finally improved and figured things out. But then they decided to put a $60 price tag behind it when I would 100% dead serious rather have played any of their free alphas than what has been given here. The most disappointing part about this game is that overall everything you would expect from a Hello Neighbor game is present here. And that means a solid concept, but a horrible amount of bugs, terrible polishing, bad AI, and all this, but rather than being some free or $20 game, it's a $60 title. It doesn't even make sense to me why this is considered the bigger or more advanced title at all, because this game takes like an hour to beat, which is not going to cut it for a AAA price game, especially one that can be speedran in the same amount of time that it takes to load the game up. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of great things about this game and its art style and atmosphere, but there's just a million problems that go alongside it. If you like the first Hello Neighbor game and are wanting to spend twice the money to get half the product, that's the only time I could recommend this. It's worse than the first game's alphas, honestly, so I'd just play those for free. But yeah, the game is in beta, so there is still room for potential improvement, but they've been developing Neighbor games for over 5 years, and I've been saying the exact same thing, and nothing has changed. I don't recommend this game. I don't like this game. This new Hello Neighbor game is not good.